I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the monitor. The mapping drone's footage showed a perfect cube sitting on the ocean floor, its edges so sharp and precise they seemed to defy natural formation. The structure was massive, a 1,000-meter cube nearly 4,000 feet underwater, yet somehow it absorbed our sonar waves like they were nothing. "That can't be right," I muttered, leaning closer to the screen. I adjusted my glasses and ran the footage back, watching it again. The black shape maintained its impossible geometric perfection against the muddy seafloor backdrop. I'd spent my entire career studying underwater geological formations, and nothing in my experience could explain what I was looking at. I turned to Christine Patel beside me, hoping she might have some explanation I hadn't considered. But the expression on her face mirrored my own confusion. Her dark eyes were wide, brow furrowed as she stared at the footage. "Are you seeing this?" I asked her. "I'm seeing it, Cameron," she said quietly. "I just don't understand what I'm seeing." Christine had been my colleague for over 7 years. As one of the most respected marine geologists in the field, if something left her speechless, it was truly extraordinary. "Could it be some kind of classified military installation?" I suggested, though the idea seemed far-fetched even as I said it. She shook her head slowly. "At that depth, with those dimensions? Not possible with current engineering capabilities." We spent the next several days running every test we could think of on the footage. We checked and rechecked the drone systems, sent down 2 more drones to confirm the findings, and consulted with experts across multiple disciplines. The cube remained an enigma, a perfect geometric anomaly that shouldn't exist. That discovery changed everything. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of the Mariana Explorer, watching the final preparations for our descent. The ship rolled beneath my feet, the Pacific stretching around us. After meetings, funding applications, and assembling the right team, we were finally here, directly above the cube. I took a deep breath of the salty air and checked my watch. 20 minutes until the final briefing. The past 3 months had been chaotic. After our discovery, the scientific community erupted with theories, some suggesting ancient civilizations, others alien technology. A few even claimed it was a natural phenomenon we didn't understand. Whatever it was, I was about to lead a team to find out. I walked across the deck toward the main lab, nodding to crew members as I passed. Inside, my team was already gathering around the conference table. Christine looked up as I entered. She'd been with this project from the beginning, her expertise in marine geology making her invaluable. She gave me a small smile, her tablet filled with notes in front of her. "Ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as anyone can be to investigate an impossible underwater cube," I replied, taking my seat at the head of the table. Dale Torres sat to my left, his military posture unmistakable even in casual clothes. As our military liaison, he'd been tasked with both our security and coordinating with naval intelligence. His face remained impassive as he reviewed something on his tablet. Across from him sat Maria Kim, our physicist. She pushed her glasses up her nose as she scribbled equations in a notebook, completely absorbed in her work. Maria had been brought on specifically to help us understand the cube's unusual properties, particularly its sonar absorption. "The math still doesn't work," she muttered, not looking up. "A structure that size shouldn't be able to exist at that depth without implosion, let alone remain perfectly cubic." Barry, our engineer, was fiddling with a small device next to her. With his sandy hair and perpetual stubble, he looked more like a surfer than the brilliant mind responsible for designing half our specialized equipment. "The submersible's ready," he said, glancing up at me. Final check's all green. She'll take us down there without a hitch. Lexi Baldwin, the final member of our team, hurried in last. Her curly black hair was pulled back in a practical style, and she carried several tablets under one arm. "Sorry," she said, sliding into her seat. "Just finished testing the communication systems. We should maintain contact with the ship even at maximum depth, but there might be interference near the cube based on its properties." As our communication specialist, Lexi would be our lifeline to the surface. Her expertise would be crucial if we encountered problems, a thought I tried not to dwell on. The door opened, and Blake Summers walked in. As captain of the Mariana Explorer and our project supervisor, his support had been crucial in getting this expedition approved. His face showed years of experience at sea, and he commanded respect just by entering the room. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had faced the ocean's dangers and lived to tell about it. "Let's get started," Blake said, taking his position at the front of the room. "You're about to attempt something unprecedented, and I want to make absolutely clear what we're dealing with here." He tapped a control, and a holographic display of the cube appeared above the center of the table. The black geometric form rotated slowly, various measurements and data points highlighting its features. "This structure sits at nearly 4,000 feet below sea level," Blake continued, his deep voice filling the room. "At that depth, the pressure is over 125 times what you experience at the surface. Nothing man-made could survive there for any extended period without someone knowing about it." He zoomed in on one corner of the cube, showing its perfect 90-degree angle. "Nature doesn't create perfect shapes like this. Not at this scale, or with this precision." Blake looked at each of us. "We've talked to every expert. No one has a scientific explanation." The room fell silent as we all stared at the rotating image. I'd spent weeks looking at this same hologram, yet it still filled me with a mixture of wonder and unease. "What about its material composition?" Maria asked, breaking the silence. "Have we learned anything new from the sample analyses?" Blake shook his head. "Nothing conclusive. The surface appears to be some kind of composite material unlike anything we've seen before. It absorbs light in a way that makes detailed spectroscopic analysis difficult." "And it completely absorbs sonar waves," Christine added. "That's not just unusual. It's theoretically impossible for a solid structure." Dale leaned forward, his expression serious. "Have we ruled out all terrestrial origins, military or otherwise?" "Every government and research institution with deep-sea capabilities has denied knowledge of it," Blake replied. "And frankly, the engineering required to build something like this at that depth is beyond our current capabilities." Barry whistled low. "So we're looking at either an incredible natural phenomenon that defies everything we know about geology or something that wasn't made by us," Lexi finished quietly. The implication hung in the air. I'd been careful not to jump to conclusions over the past months, but the possibility had occurred to all of us. Blake brought up additional data on the display. "Your submersible, the Abyssal Pioneer, will take approximately 4 hours to reach the target depth. You'll conduct initial external observations, then, if conditions permit, attempt to collect samples from the surface." I nodded in agreement, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. As lead scientist for this mission, the final decisions would fall to me. "We need to go down and check it out," I said, looking at my team. "What we find could change everything we know. We can't figure this out with remote tools." I stood up, drawing everyone's attention. "We've planned for every contingency we can think of, but we need to stay flexible. If at any point I determine the risk is too great, we abort and return to the surface. Safety comes first." Dale nodded approvingly, while Maria looked slightly disappointed at the possibility of turning back. "Remember, I said. We're scientists, not heroes. Our job is to observe, document, and bring that information back. The team acknowledged this with varying degrees of enthusiasm. I understood their eagerness. We were about to investigate something that could potentially rewrite textbooks across multiple scientific disciplines. We depart at 0600 hours tomorrow, Blake concluded, shutting down the holographic display. Get some rest while you can. As the meeting dispersed, I stayed behind, staring at the now empty space where the cube's image had been floating. Christine lingered as well, coming to stand beside me. Having second thoughts? She asked quietly. I considered her question carefully. Not second thoughts, just trying to prepare myself for what we might find. How do you prepare to face something that shouldn't exist? She smiled slightly. That's why they picked you to lead this, Cameron. You've always been comfortable with not knowing all the answers. I wished I felt as confident as she made me sound. The truth was, none of us knew what awaited us thousands of feet below. Tomorrow, we would begin our descent toward a perfect geometric anomaly that defied explanation, a 1,000-meter cube sitting silently on the ocean floor, waiting to be discovered. My stomach tightened as the abyssal pioneer sank deeper into the crushing darkness. The submersible creaked under the immense pressure, a constant reminder of the 4,000 feet of water between us and the surface. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, watching the depth gauge tick steadily downward. Everything holding together, Barry? I asked, glancing at our engineer who monitored the hull integrity systems. So far, so good, boss. She's built for this, but I still don't like pushing her limits, Barry replied, his fingers dancing across the control panel. Christine sat beside me, her face illuminated by the glow of her tablet. The structure should appear any minute now, assuming our coordinates are accurate. I nodded, too tense for small talk. This descent had taken months, meetings, equipment tests, and debates about what we might find. Now that we were actually going down, it felt surreal. The hours crept by slowly. Our initial excitement gave way to the monotony of descent. Dale and Lexi had fallen into a quiet card game near the rear of the cabin. Maria mumbled equations to herself as she monitored our trajectory. Christine kept rechecking her research notes. Only Barry remained completely focused, eyes never leaving his instruments. Almost 4 hours into our descent, Dale abandoned his card game and pressed his face against the thick observation window. There, he said, pointing into the murky blue. Cut the main lights and go to minimum illumination. Barry complied, and the cabin dimmed. We all gathered at the viewport, squinting into the darkness. Then I saw it, an impossibly black shape materializing in our floodlights. The cube. Even from a distance, its perfect geometry looked utterly wrong against the natural contours of the ocean floor. My God, Christine whispered beside me. It's even more striking in person than in the footage. I couldn't disagree. The building's sharp angles and black surface absorbed our lights instead of reflecting them. It was precise in a way that seemed impossible at these depths, or anywhere on Earth. Hold up, Dale said suddenly, leaning closer to the glass. There's something there, an opening. He pointed toward what appeared to be a rectangular gap in the cube's otherwise seamless face. That wasn't in any of the drone footage. Are you sure? I asked, scanning my memory of the countless hours of video we'd analyzed. Absolutely positive, Dale replied, his military training evident in his confident assessment. Every inch of this thing was mapped. There was no entrance. I exchanged a glance with Christine. Could the drones have missed it? Not possible, she said. We had multiple passes from different angles. So either it's new, I said slowly, or it wasn't there before. A heavy silence fell over the cabin. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone. "Barry," I finally said, "take us in closer. Approach the opening cautiously." Barry nodded, his usual joviality replaced with intense focus. "On it, boss." The submersible moved toward the rectangular opening. As we got closer, I felt a chill. The entrance was cut with sharp, precise angles. "Distance to opening, 30 meters, Barry announced. "All instruments functioning normally?" I asked, scanning the various displays around the cabin. "Everything's green," Maria confirmed. At 20 meters out, the first anomaly occurred. The depth gauge flickered, jumping between numbers before settling again. "Did you see that?" I asked, pointing to the instrument panel. Maria frowned. "Just a glitch. Probably electromagnetic interference." But as we drew closer, more instruments began to behave erratically. The compass spun wildly, our external temperature readings fluctuated, and the sonar display showed bizarre echoes that made no sense. "Something's affecting our equipment," I said. "Barry, proceed with caution." 10 meters to threshold," Barry replied, his voice tight with concentration. As we crossed into the opening, a wave of static washed over all our displays at once. The lights dimmed momentarily before stabilizing. The submersible gave a slight shudder, as if passing through some kind of barrier. "We're inside," Barry said. I stared through the viewport, unable to process what I was seeing. The chamber we'd entered was wrong. Impossibly wrong. The interior space stretched out in all directions, far larger than the cube's external dimensions should allow. "This can't be right," I muttered. The exterior was roughly 1,000 meters across, but this... "I'm getting readings now," Maria interrupted, her voice strained with confusion. "According to our instruments, this chamber is approximately 3,000 meters in diameter." "That's impossible," Christine said. "It would extend well beyond the exterior walls we just saw." "I know what the readings say," Maria replied, checking and rechecking her instruments. "And they all confirm the same thing. This interior space is about 3 times larger than the exterior dimensions." "Some kind of optical illusion?" Dale suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "No," Maria said firmly. "These are solid measurements from multiple instruments. Somehow, the interior is larger than the exterior." I struggled to understand what we were seeing. The chamber was large, with black material covering every surface. The ceiling towered above us, and the far wall was hard to see even with our lights at full power. "There's more," Maria added, checking another instrument. "I'm detecting breathable atmosphere in here. Nitrogen-oxygen mix, similar to Earth normal. And the pressure, it's stabilized at 1 atmosphere. That's not possible 4,000 feet underwater," Barry objected. "Check it yourself," Maria replied. I made a decision. "Barry, take us up to the surface of whatever body of water we're in here, slowly." The submersible rose through the dark water within the chamber. When we breached the surface, the exterior cameras showed an expanse of still, black water stretching toward distant walls. "Temperature is steady at 20 degrees, Maria said. "Gravity is normal." "We're going to dock," I announced after a moment of consideration. "We came here to explore, and that's what we're going to do." No one objected, though I could see the apprehension on their faces, the same apprehension I felt but couldn't afford to show as team leader. Barry guided the Abyssal Pioneer to a flat area near the entrance we'd come through. With practiced efficiency, we prepared for exterior exploration. I doubled and tripled checked my equipment while the others did the same. "Listen up," I said, as we gathered near the submersible's exit hatch. "Whatever this place is, it defies everything we understand about physics. We maintain constant communication. No one goes anywhere alone. We stay together as a group. Clear? Everyone nodded solemnly. Our primary objective is to document what we find and return safely. If anything feels off, more off than it already is, we head back immediately. We exited the submersible and set up a small base camp on the black surface near our vessel. The ground beneath our boots was solid. After establishing the base camp with essential equipment and emergency supplies, we gathered at what appeared to be a corridor leading away from the main chamber. "This is it," I said, switching on my helmet light. "Stay close." We entered the corridor as a group. The passage was wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side comfortably. Like everything else, it was constructed of the same seamless black material. I reached out and touched the wall. The surface was smooth without any visible seams or joints and slightly warm to the touch, not cold as I'd expected from something at these depths. It felt almost organic, though completely solid when I applied pressure. "It's a bit warmer than usual," I said. "I can't see how they built this. It looks like the whole thing was made in one piece." "Or grown," Maria suggested quietly. I pulled my hand away, suddenly uncomfortable with the contact. The corridor stretched ahead of us, perfectly straight and utterly alien in its geometric precision. The corridor curved upward. My eyes told me we were climbing, but the inclinometer in my hand stubbornly reported we were moving on a perfectly horizontal plane. I stopped walking, and the others halted behind me. "Everyone seeing this?" I asked, running my hand along the wall that seemed to bend impossibly. Christine stood beside me, her forehead creased with concentration. "The instruments can't both be right. Either we're climbing, or we're not." I pulled out our digital compass and watched the needle spin wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Our mapping software flickered on my tablet, the path we'd traveled appearing as nonsensical zigzags rather than the straight line we'd been walking. Maria stepped forward, her tablet displaying a 3-dimensional model of our route. "According to these readings, we've walked in a straight line for 2 kilometers, she said, her voice tight with confusion. "But that's not possible because we're now directly above our starting point." "Above?" Dale asked. "How far above?" "About 50 meters, Maria replied, tapping the screen. "The data shows we've made a perfect vertical climb while walking on what feels like a flat surface." I looked back the way we'd come. The corridor stretched behind us, appearing perfectly straight despite what the readings suggested. Barry ran his equipment scanner along the wall, his movements precise and methodical. "None of this makes any sense," Lexi said, her voice echoing slightly in the corridor. "How can we be walking straight but moving up?" We continued forward until we reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 identical paths. Each branched off at the same angle, with the same dimensions, the same black material forming the walls, floor, and ceiling. "Which way?" Christine asked. I pulled out a small canister of phosphorescent paint from my pack. "We need to mark our path. I'm not taking chances with this place." I sprayed a bright arrow pointing toward the rightmost corridor, the paint glowing vividly against the black surface. "We'll go this way. If we need to backtrack, we'll know which path we took." We moved about 10 meters down our chosen corridor when something made me look back. The junction was still visible, but the glowing arrow I'd painted was gone. No trace remained on the wall. "Hey!" I called to the others, pointing back. "The mark is gone." Everyone turned to look. "That's not possible," Christine said, moving back to inspect the wall. "Paint doesn't just disappear." Barry ran his hand over the spot where the arrow had been. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice low and serious. "I think the structure is changing around us." "Changing how?" Dale asked, his hand moving instinctively to the utility knife at his belt. "I don't know," Barry replied. But these readings indicate the molecular structure of these walls is in constant flux. It's almost like the floor shifted beneath my feet without warning. I lost my balance, stumbling sideways as the sensation of gravity changed. My shoulder slammed against what had been the wall, but was now feeling more like the floor. What's happening? Christine grabbed my arm as the corridor continued to tilt. The walls, ceiling, and floor were rotating around us like we were inside a slowly turning cylinder. I felt my weight shifting as gravity pulled me in a new direction. Lexi screamed as she lost her footing, tumbling down what had been a vertical wall seconds before. She slid several feet before Dale lunged forward, catching her arm. "I've got you!" he shouted, bracing himself against a ridge in the surface. The rotation continued. What had been the ceiling was now becoming the floor. My body pressed against the surface as gravity shifted 90 degrees from its original orientation. "Everyone stay together!" I shouted, trying to crawl toward Dale and Lexi while keeping Christine close to me. "Don't get separated!" But it was too late. The rotation created a new configuration of the space. Where Barry and Maria had been standing moments ago, there was now only a solid wall. They'd vanished from sight. "Barry? Maria?" I called out, pressing my hand against the new wall. It was solid and seamless, as if it had always been there. "Cameron, can you hear me?" Barry's voice came through my communication device, slightly distorted but clear enough to understand. "We hear you," I replied, relief flooding through me that they were at least alive. "Are you both okay?" "We're fine," Maria answered, "but we're in some kind of chamber now. The corridor just rearranged itself. There's no door, no exit that we can see." "We're in a completely different room," Barry added. "1 second we were with you, and then the floor moved and a wall appeared between us." I pressed my hand harder against the wall separating us, as if I could somehow push through it. "Can you see any way to get back to us?" "Negative," Barry replied after a pause. "There's no visible path connecting to where you are. It's just a sealed room." Dale helped Lexi to her feet, on what had been the ceiling minutes ago, but was now a stable floor. Christine stood beside me, her face pale as she stared at the wall that had separated our team. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. I placed my hand on my communication device, maintaining the connection to our separated teammates. "We need to find a way to regroup," I said, looking at the 3 faces still with me, then at the wall hiding the other 2. "And we need to do it fast." "Everyone stay calm," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll find Barry and Maria and get back to the submersible. Right now, our priority is sticking together and navigating our way out of here." Dale nodded, his jaw tight. "The sooner we're out of this place, the better." "Which way?" Christine asked, looking at the corridors stretching in different directions. I checked the mapping equipment again, but the readings remained nonsensical. "The submersible was this way, I think." I pointed to what seemed to be the direction we'd come from, though I couldn't be certain anymore. As we moved forward, I felt something odd beneath my feet, a subtle, rhythmic vibration pulsing through the floor. I stopped walking and knelt down, placing my palm flat against the surface. "Does anyone else feel that?" I asked, looking up at the others. Christine knelt beside me, her hand joining mine on the floor. "Yes, like a pulse." I stood up, a prickly sensation crawling up my spine. The temperature around us shifted suddenly, dropping several degrees before quickly warming again, then cooling once more. "Is it just me, or is it getting colder?" Lexi asked, rubbing her arms. "No, it's not just you," I said, watching my breath form a cloud in front of my face. Then, just as quickly, the air warmed enough that sweat beaded on my forehead. Dale pulled out a thermometer from his pack. temperatures jumping all over the place. 32 degrees 1 second, 78 the next. A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind as I watched the walls around us. Were they different somehow? The surface seemed to have a slight give to it that I hadn't noticed before. "Christine," I said quietly, "put your hand on the wall." She gave me a questioning look but did as I asked, pressing her palm against the smooth black surface. "It's warm," she said, and then her eyes widened. "And getting warmer." I watched as she pulled her hand away quickly. "The wall, it's responding to my touch." "That's impossible," Dale said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Test it yourself," I told him. Dale hesitantly placed his hand on the wall. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "What the hell is this place?" I pulled out the communication device, desperate to re-establish contact with Barry and Maria. "Barry? Maria? Can you hear me?" The response came broken, filled with static. "Cameron, rooms keep changing." Barry's voice cut in and out. "Barry, where are you?" I shouted into the device. "Geometry's all wrong. Shouldn't be possible." His voice faded further. "Maria? Are you there?" I tried again. A burst of static, then Maria's voice came through, high with panic. "Not a structure at all. Some kind of digestive." Her last words sent ice through my veins. Before I could respond, a piercing scream came through the device, then nothing but dead silence. "Maria!" I yelled, but the communication line had gone dead. Cold dread washed over me as I looked at the others. Their faces reflected the fear I felt. "We need to keep moving," I said, my mouth dry. "Now." We pressed forward with the corridor seeming to shift subtly around us. What had appeared solid and geometric earlier now had an unsettling organic quality. I watched in horror as a section of wall rippled, not like water, but like muscle contracting. Dale saw it too and froze mid-step. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "Yes," I replied, unable to tear my eyes away as another ripple moved across the surface. Christine pointed ahead. "Look at those." Strange grooves had begun to form in the walls, narrow at first, then widening like lips parting. A thick, clear fluid seeped from them, dripping onto the floor. "Don't touch that," I warned, stepping carefully around a puddle of the substance. Lexi moved closer to Dale, edging away from the wall. "What's happening?" I didn't finish my sentence. As Lexi shifted her position, her sleeve brushed against one of the grooves. The fabric sizzled on contact, dissolving almost instantly and exposing the skin of her arm. "Ah!" She jumped back, clutching her arm. "It burned through my sleeve!" Dale quickly examined her arm. "The skin's red, but it didn't touch you directly." I stared at her dissolved sleeve, then at the walls around us that continued to shift and pulse. Maria's final words echoed in my mind. "Digestive system." "Listen to me," I said firmly, gathering everyone closer. "We need to get out of here immediately. This isn't a structure. It's not a building or a machine." "What are you saying?" Christine asked, though her expression told me she already suspected. "This is a living organism," I said, the words sounding unbelievable even as I spoke them. "And we're trapped inside it." I tried to retrace our steps through the corridors, searching for any landmark or sign that might lead us back to the submersible. The walls that had twisted left now curved right. Passages that had sloped up now sloped down. Every turn revealed a new layout. "This is useless," I said, stopping at another junction. "Everything's completely different now." Dale moved beside me, his tactical mindset already calculating possibilities. He pulled out his tablet, now displaying only static and nonsensical data. and wiped the screen clean with his sleeve. "We need to start mapping these changes," he said, pulling a stylus from his pocket. "Even if our equipment isn't working, we can track it manually. If this thing is alive, like you said, it must follow some kind of pattern when it reconfigures itself." Christine stepped closer, examining Dale's impromptu mapping attempt. "You think we can predict its movements?" "Worth a shot," Dale said, drawing a quick outline of our position. "Every living organism has systems: respiratory, digestive, and a neural system. If it's alive, it must have a central nervous system we can target." I considered his logic. "You're suggesting we find its brain, or whatever passes for one?" Dale nodded grimly. "Find that, and maybe we can make this thing let us go." We started forward again, with Dale marking down each turn and shift in the environment on his tablet. I noticed how he'd pause occasionally, placing a hand against the wall to feel for vibrations before noting something down. Christine stayed close to me, her scientific mind visibly processing every detail around us. After what felt like an hour of careful progress, we came upon an opening I hadn't seen before, a circular entrance leading to a large chamber. I hesitated at the threshold, signaling for the others to wait. "Something's different here," I whispered. The chamber was unlike any space we'd seen. The walls formed a dome, and intricate patterns of blue light pulsed across every surface. The light created shifting shadows that made the room feel alive. I stepped inside, drawn by its beauty. The floor felt different, smoother, almost like walking on skin instead of the hard corridors. Christine moved to my side, her eyes wide with fascination as she studied the pulsing lights. She reached toward one wall, not quite touching it, tracing the movement of the light patterns in the air with her finger. "These patterns," she whispered, her voice full of academic wonder despite our situation. "They're not random." "What do you mean?" I asked, watching the lights fade and brighten in sequence. "Look at how they spread." She pointed to a bright pulse splitting into smaller ones, moving outward and creating new patterns. "This is like neural activity, watching thoughts move through a brain." Dale remained near the entrance, keeping watch on the corridor behind us. "So we found its thinking part?" Christine shook her head. "Not exactly, but this is communication." She turned to me, her voice lower. "It's thinking, Cameron. I suspect it's learning from us. Every time we adapt, it creates a new change. It's studying our responses." The implications hit me hard. We weren't just trapped in a living structure. We were being observed, tested, perhaps even experimented on. "If it can learn, maybe we can communicate with it somehow," I suggested, desperate for any solution. Before Christine could respond, the entire chamber shuddered violently. The blue patterns flashed bright white for an instant, then returned to their pulsing rhythm, but faster now, more erratic. The tremor intensified, throwing me off balance. I fell hard onto the floor, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. The chamber shook as though caught in an earthquake, the bioluminescent patterns strobing chaotically. I struggled to my hands and knees, looking for the others through the disorienting flashes of light. Christine had braced herself against a wall. Dale was helping Lexi stay upright near the entrance. Then everything stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I pushed myself up, disoriented but intact. Christine staggered toward me, her hand reaching out. Dale stood alone by the entrance, looking around frantically. "Lexi," he called out. "Lexi!" I spun around, searching the chamber. Where Lexi had stood seconds ago, there was now only smooth, unbroken floor, as if she had never been there at all. Dale rushed to the spot, dropping to his knees and running his hands over the seamless surface. "She was right here." Right here." He began pounding on the floor with his fists. "Lexi, can you hear me?" I joined him, pressing my ear against the surface, hoping to catch any sound from below. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then faintly, so faintly I almost thought I imagined it, came a scream. Lexi's voice, distorted and distant, as if calling from miles away rather than just beneath us. Then silence fell again, absolute and terrible. Dale continued pounding, his movements growing more desperate. "We have to get her back. We have to." "Dale," Christine said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We can't break through this." He shook his head, unwilling to accept it, but his strikes against the floor gradually weakened as reality set in. I stood up, trying to process what had happened. First Barry and Maria, now Lexi. Our group of 6 had been cut in half in a matter of hours. Just the 3 of us remained now, trapped inside an entity that seemed determined to separate us one by one. "We need to keep moving," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Standing here won't help Lexi." As I spoke, I became aware of something else changing. Each breath I took seemed to deliver less air than the one before. I found myself taking deeper, more frequent breaths, without conscious effort. "Does the air feel thinner to you?" I asked, looking between Dale and Christine. Christine nodded, pressing a hand to her throat. "Oxygen levels are dropping." Dale finally stood up from the floor, his expression hardening as he took several quick breaths. "It's not just changing the layout," he said. "It's changing the environment too." The organism wasn't just reacting to us, it was actively weakening us. First, it separated our team, then made it harder for us to breathe. "It's testing our limits," I said, fighting the urge to panic as I took another unsatisfying breath. "We need to find the central system Dale talked about, and we need to find it fast." I watched helplessly as Dale collapsed to his knees, his face contorting as he gasped for air, his hands clutched at his throat, eyes wide with panic. "The oxygen," Christine said, her voice thin in the increasingly sparse atmosphere. "It's dropping fast in this section." I grabbed Dale's left arm while Christine took his right. We tried pulling him up, our muscles straining against his weight. His military-trained body felt impossibly heavy as he struggled to help us, his movements growing weaker by the second. "Come on," I urged through gritted teeth. "Just a few more feet. We need to get you out of this zone." Dale's eyes locked with mine, terror replacing his usual tactical calm. His lips moved, but no words came out. A tremor shook the corridor. I felt it first through my feet, a subtle vibration that quickly intensified. The floor began to tilt beneath us. "Hold on!" I shouted, tightening my grip on Dale. The rotation accelerated without warning. The corridor turned sideways, and my feet lost contact with what had been the floor. Christine slammed against what was now beneath us, losing her grip on Dale's arm. I tried desperately to maintain my hold, but his weight pulled against my fingers. "No!" I screamed as Dale slipped from my grasp. He slid away from us into the darkness of what had become a vertical shaft. His body tumbled, bouncing against the walls as he disappeared from view. His scream echoed up to us, growing fainter until it vanished completely into silence. Christine and I pressed ourselves against the wall, now serving as our floor, breathing hard. The corridor stabilized in its new configuration, as if satisfied with claiming another victim. "Dale!" I called out, knowing it was futile. No response came back. My hand found Christine's in the semi-darkness. I gripped it tightly, feeling her fingers curl around mine with equal force. Her palm was slick with sweat, trembling slightly, but her grip remained strong. I'm not losing you too, I said, my voice low and raw. We've lost Barry, Maria, Lexi, and now Dale. You're all I have left. Christine nodded, her face pale in the dim light. Strands of her black hair had come loose from her braid, sticking to her forehead. We're doing everything wrong, I said. We need to think like this organism. It's using our confusion against us. We keep trying to find logic in a space that doesn't have it. We expect floors to stay floors and walls to stay walls. I watched as understanding gradually transformed Christine's expression. Her eyes widened, not with fear but with insight. What if we stop fighting it? She asked. What if we stop trying to maintain our bearings at all? What do you mean? This entity, it's trapping us based on human perception and expectations. It anticipates where we'll go, how we'll react. Her voice grew stronger with each word. What if we do the opposite? Move in ways that make no sense. Turn back when logic says go forward. Go up when down seems right. I grasped her insight immediately. It's learning our patterns, so we need to be unpredictable. Exactly. We got to our feet carefully, still holding hands. I pointed to a corridor that sloped upward to our right, the most obvious path to take. So, we don't go that way, I said. No. Christine pointed to a narrow opening that angled sharply downward, looking more like a maintenance shaft than a passage. We go that way instead. We crawled into the tight space, moving deliberately against every instinct. When we reached a junction with 3 paths, I chose the one that looked least stable. When our equipment indicated we should turn right to reach the outer chamber, we turned left. The walls pulsed faster, and corridors shifted positions, sometimes changing while we walked. Instead of trying to stay oriented, we embraced the chaos, moving in patterns that felt wrong. It's working, Christine whispered after we deliberately backtracked for the 3rd time. Look at the walls. The surface texture had changed, becoming uneven with ridges and furrows that hadn't been there before. The pulsing light patterns grew erratic, flashing in disjointed sequences rather than the steady rhythm we'd observed earlier. I sensed we were making progress. The organism appeared increasingly agitated by our unpredictable movements. When we reached what seemed like a dead end, instead of turning around, we sat down and waited for several minutes before choosing a direction that appeared to lead deeper into the structure rather than outward. It can't predict what we're going to do next, I said, watching as a corridor formed in front of us, then quickly sealed itself when we made no move to enter it. We're disrupting its pattern recognition abilities. It's learning constantly, Christine added, but we're not giving it consistent data to learn from. We continued our counterintuitive journey, deliberately zigzagging through spaces, stopping randomly, and sometimes even walking in circles. Each time, the organism's reactions grew more erratic. Walls bulged and retracted, ceilings lowered then raised again. Passages appeared and disappeared with increasing speed. We had found a weakness, perhaps the only one this entity had. It trapped prey by manipulating space and expectation, but it couldn't handle prey that moved unpredictably. We were disrupting its ability to anticipate our next moves, and I could sense its confusion growing. This way, Christine said, pulling me toward what looked like a solid wall. I followed without hesitation, trusting her instinct to choose the most counterintuitive path. As we approached, the wall rippled and parted, revealing a passage we couldn't have predicted would form. I finally reached a chamber with Christine that hummed with energy. The noise wasn't loud exactly, more like a constant vibration you could feel in your teeth and bones. The space was different from anything we'd seen before, dome-shaped with smooth, almost glassy walls that pulsed with soft blue light. But what caught my attention was the object floating in the center of the room. "Look at that," I whispered, though I didn't need to point. There was nothing else to see. Suspended about 5 feet off the ground was a crystalline structure roughly the size of a beach ball. It didn't touch any surface, just hung there, rotating slowly. Complex patterns of light moved across its faceted surface, sometimes racing in organized sequences, other times blooming outward like ripples in water. The patterns matched the pulsing in the walls around us. Christine moved closer to me, her shoulder brushing against mine. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. I nodded, unable to look away. I think this is it. The central system Dale was talking about. We approached it, keeping our steps light. The humming grew louder as we got closer. "It's a brain," I said, watching the light patterns communicate with the walls. "This has to control everything. The shifting corridors, the changing environment." Christine reached out a hand but stopped just short of touching it. "The patterns are similar to what we saw in the other chamber, but much more complex." I studied the crystal, noticing how each burst of light coincided with a subtle shift in the room around us. When a particular pattern raced around the lower half of the structure, I felt the floor beneath us warm slightly. Another pattern at the top made the ceiling contract by a few inches. "I think we can use this," I said. "If we disrupt it, we might force the organism to reset to a basic configuration." "You mean damage it?" Christine asked, looking uncertain. "Not permanently. Just enough to make it lose control of all these internal changes. That might create an opening, a way back to the submersible." Christine nodded slowly. "It's worth trying. We don't have many options left." We were both silent for a moment, thinking about Barry, Maria, Lexi, and Dale. Gone. Just gone. "What should we—" Christine started to ask. The floor beneath her feet suddenly changed texture, becoming translucent. I watched in horror as it began to dissolve into nothing, starting as a small circle that widened rapidly. "Christine!" I lunged forward, grabbing her outstretched hand as her feet lost purchase. Her body dropped through the widening hole, with only our connected hands keeping her from falling completely. Her eyes met mine, wide with terror. "Cameron!" I gripped her hand with everything I had, my fingers locked around her wrist, hers around mine. My free hand scrambled for purchase on the solid part of the floor, trying to brace myself against her weight. I could feel her slipping. "Hold on," I shouted. "Just hold on." But her hand was sliding through mine, inch by inch. I tried to readjust my grip, to pull her up, but the edge of the hole was expanding toward me now. There was nothing to brace against. "Don't let go," she pleaded, her voice tight with fear. "I won't," I promised, even as I felt her fingers sliding further through mine. Her eyes never left mine as our fingertips touched one last time. Then she was gone, falling silently into darkness below. The floor sealed instantly behind her, becoming solid and opaque again as if nothing had happened. "No!" I screamed, pounding on the floor. "Christine!" I pressed my ear against the surface, listening for any sound, any response. Nothing. I stayed there on my hands and knees, staring at the spot where she had disappeared, where they had all disappeared. Barry, Maria, Lexi, Dale, and now Christine. All gone. I was completely alone. The crystalline structure continued its slow rotation in the center of the room, light patterns dancing across its surface without interruption, like nothing had happened, like it hadn't just swallowed 5 people whole. Something hot and unfamiliar swelled inside me, a mixture of grief and rage so intense it made my vision blur. I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists. "You took them all," I said to the floating crystal. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, flat and cold. "And I'm probably next, aren't I?" The crystal pulsed, its light patterns shifting slightly. I wasn't getting out of here. That much was becoming clear. But I wasn't going to just wait for this thing to take me too. If I was going down, I would at least damage the entity that had taken my colleagues, my friends. My oxygen tank was still strapped to my back, standard procedure for our expedition suits, even when we weren't underwater. I reached back and began unfastening it, my eyes never leaving the crystalline structure. "Let's see how you like having your brain scrambled," I muttered as I removed the tank and hefted its weight in my hands. I approached the crystal, studying it closely. It wasn't a single piece, but thousands of smaller fragments held together. The light flowed through the structure itself. Each pulse from the crystal corresponded exactly with changes in the chamber. When a bright flash traveled through the upper right quadrant, the ceiling in that corner rippled. When a spiral pattern formed near the bottom, the floor texture changed slightly. It was all connected, all controlled from this central point. I watched the patterns for several minutes and noticed a rhythm. This wasn't automatic. This was decision-making. This was the control center of the organism, managing its internal changes and responses. It had been studying us, learning from us, and eliminating us one by one. I stood before it, oxygen tank gripped tightly in my hands, seeing in its light patterns the last moments of my team reflected back at me. I gripped the oxygen tank tightly, my knuckles white from the pressure. Without hesitation, I slammed it against the crystalline brain with every ounce of strength I had left. The impact sent a jolt up my arms, but I didn't care. The crystal made a sound, not quite a crack, but more like ice breaking on a frozen lake. A spiderweb of fractures spread across its surface. Something leaked from it. A bright glowing liquid that dripped to the floor and sizzled on contact. The room shook. No, the entire cube shuddered. "That's for my team," I muttered through gritted teeth. I hit it again and again. Each impact deepened the fractures until the crystal's rotation became uneven, wobbling on its axis as more luminescent fluid poured out. The walls around me twisted and bulged. The blue patterns that had pulsed steadily now flashed in chaotic bursts. The floor buckled beneath my feet. I lost my balance as gravity itself seemed to give up making sense. One moment I was falling toward what had been a wall. The next, I was sliding across the ceiling. My stomach lurched as directions became meaningless. Up, down, left, right, all these concepts melted away in the cube's death throes. I slammed into something hard. The oxygen tank flew from my hands and disappeared into the morphing architecture. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I couldn't even tell which way I'd fallen. The entire structure was reorganizing itself, its perfect logic crumbling into random spasmodic movements. Through the blur of motion and flashing lights, I caught a glimpse of something that hadn't been there before. A crack of daylight. Not the artificial blue glow that had lit our journey, but actual, natural light. I blinked, sure I was hallucinating. The daylight vanished as a wall formed between us, then reappeared as the cube twisted again. This thing was losing control of its structure, its architectural precision falling apart. I had to reach that light. I crawled on all fours, though sometimes those fours became 2s or 6s as surfaces shifted under me. Every few seconds, the direction of gravity changed, throwing me against a new surface. I crawled, slid, pulled myself forward whenever I could gain purchase. The floor beneath me changed with each movement. 1 second it was smooth, then it felt like flesh, yielding under my weight. A moment later, it turned into sharp shapes that cut into my palms and knees. I felt blood trickling down my wrists. "Come on," I grunted, pushing forward even as the blood made my hands slip. The light grew brighter. 20 feet, 10 feet. The opening appeared and disappeared as the cube's convulsions continued, but each time it returned, I was closer. A particularly violent shift sent me tumbling backward. I dug my fingers into a soft section of floor, anchoring myself. The material gave way slightly, then hardened around my fingers. I yanked my hand free before it could be trapped permanently. 5 feet. The opening was just ahead, a ragged tear in the cube's exterior. Beyond it, blue sky. With one final push, I threw myself toward the gap. My body slid through the opening, and suddenly I was outside, sprawled on what appeared to be a ledge on the cube's exterior. I gasped for breath, filling my lungs with fresh air for the first time in what felt like days. The sun was bright overhead, almost painfully so after hours in the cube's interior. I squinted, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The cube had surfaced. The massive structure had risen from the ocean to break the surface. But it was no longer a cube. Its shape had twisted, bulging in places and concave in others as if chunks had been taken out. The black surface was marked by protrusions and rifts, pulsing like a wounded animal. I lay on one of the flatter sections, maybe 30 feet above the water. All around, the ocean stretched to the horizon. I'd never been so happy to see it. A distant sound caught my attention, the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades cutting through air. I turned my head, wincing at the pain in my neck, and spotted a dark shape approaching from the east. The Mariana Explorer's rescue helicopter. I pushed myself to my knees, ignoring the burning pain from my cuts. I raised both arms and waved them back and forth, trying to make myself visible against the black surface of the cube. "Here!" I shouted, though I knew they couldn't hear me over the distance and the helicopter noise. "I'm here." The helicopter changed course slightly, angling toward the cube. They'd seen me. Relief washed over me in a wave so powerful it took whatever strength I had left. My arms dropped to my sides, suddenly too heavy to hold up. My vision began to narrow, darkening at the edges. As the helicopter grew larger in my field of view, I felt myself toppling forward. My cheek pressed against the warm, slightly yielding surface of the cube. I couldn't move anymore. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was the helicopter hovering closer, a rescue line being prepared. They'd found me. I was the only one left. I sat alone in my quarters aboard the research vessel, staring out the window at the cube. It had stopped moving but remained partially surfaced, its once perfect form now grotesquely misshapen. The sleek geometric edges I had first seen in the drone footage months ago were gone, replaced by bulging protrusions and collapsed sections that made it look like a building after an earthquake. 3 days had passed since the rescue helicopter had pulled me from its surface, yet I couldn't stop watching it. The medical team had treated my cuts, wrapped my sprained shoulder, and told me to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Christine's face as she slipped from my grasp. I heard Dale scream as he fell into darkness. I remembered the last garbled transmission from Barry and Maria before they went silent. And Lexi, gone in an instant when the floor simply opened up and swallowed her. A knock on my door broke my trance. I didn't answer, but the door opened anyway. Blake stepped into my quarters, his weathered face tight with concern. He stood next to my chair, following my gaze out to the cube. "We're detecting unusual energy readings from that thing," he said, his voice lower than usual. "The patterns keep changing. Whatever you did in there, the thing is changing somehow." I just nodded silently. The oxygen tank I'd slammed against the crystalline structure had damaged it, but I knew the organism wasn't dead, just wounded. Like an animal that had retreated to lick its wounds, it was adapting, learning. The military wants to send down explosives, Blake continued. They're talking about neutralizing it completely. I almost laughed. They had no idea what they were dealing with. No bomb would destroy something that could bend space and manipulate matter at will. Something that had studied us, tested us, and systematically eliminated my team one by one. It won't work, I said, my voice raspy from disuse. Blake didn't argue. He just stood beside me, hands clasped behind his back, watching the cube with me. After a few minutes, I noticed a change. The surface of the water around the cube began to ripple. Look, I pointed. The cube was moving again, but not like before. It wasn't pulsing or shifting shape. It was sinking, deliberately descending back into the depths. The top portion disappeared first, then the middle, until only a corner remained visible above the waterline. Then that too slipped beneath the surface, leaving only ripples that quickly faded. Should I alert the team? Blake asked, already reaching for his radio. It doesn't matter, I said. It's gone where we can't follow. Blake hesitated, then lowered his hand. You're probably right. After he left, I continued staring at the empty patch of ocean where the cube had been. No trace remained of its existence except the haunted look in my eyes when I caught my reflection in the window glass. I felt absolute certainty that somewhere in the abyss, it was healing, learning from our encounter, and waiting. For what? I couldn't say. Perhaps for another group of curious humans to investigate it, to provide more subjects for its experiments. The weight of being the only survivor pressed down on me. I alone carried the knowledge that such a thing existed, and that it had claimed the lives of Christine, Dale, Lexi, Barry, and Maria. 5 brilliant minds gone, swallowed by an entity we couldn't begin to understand. Tomorrow I would face the board of inquiry. They would want answers. How the expedition had gone so catastrophically wrong, why I was the only one who made it back. I wondered if anyone would believe what really happened down there, or if I should even try to explain it. The footage from our equipment had been corrupted or lost. I had no proof beyond my testimony, which sounded insane even to my own ears. Perhaps I would tell them about an underwater earthquake, a tragic accident that claimed my colleagues. Something plausible, something they could accept and file away. The truth would only lead to more expeditions, more deaths. As night fell and the sea turned black, matching the darkness of the cube's exterior, I knew one thing for certain. I would never go near the ocean again.